You can take the doors and roof off, for Christ's sake. You can't do that in a Defender. A few weeks ago, Ford pulled the covers off its new Bronco, a retro-inspired off-roader that harks back to the original model from the 1960s. It's achingly cool and looks like it'll be able to handle its own when things get muddy. There's just one small problem though. It won't be available in the UK. So what do you go for if you want a retro-looking 4x4 that won't run for the hills when it's shown a muddy path? No, not you. I'll get onto you later. Anyway, you want one of these, a Jeep Wrangler. It's a proper off-roader, and like the Ford Bronco, it's a true American icon. Now today I'm going to pick it apart and see how it works as an everyday car. But before I get onto that, why not subscribe to the channel to see more in-depth reviews like this and some slightly more ridiculous ones. The Jeep Wrangler is a lot like a Porsche 911 in the sense that they nailed the design first time around and have only made light changes over the decades. Yes, the Wrangler's come on leaps and bounds since the Willy's Jeep, however it still carries the original's iconic design. Now that can make telling the difference between this model and the previous generations quite difficult, but there are a few subtle changes. So I'm going to point them out. The first is the headlight design, which, as you can see, is a little bit more rounded and digs into the grille. That's not the case on the previous generation model. You also have a light integrated into the wheel arches, and there's also a very small reel vent just behind the front wheels. One of the things I really like about the Wrangler is that when you get up and close to it, it's got some really neat details. One of them is the fuel filler cap. It's not made of the same plastic as the bumpers here. It's actually made of quite a nice metal. Then if you go a little bit further down, there's a badge on the side that says that it's trail rated. I'm not exactly sure what trail rated means, but I presume it means that you could take it off-road without breaking down. It's a bit like writing a book and then doing your own testimonials. But anyway, a fun game you can play is Spot the Jeep. Well, not that one. The company has hidden lots of little Jeep graphics around the car, and they're just really fun to hunt down. So you can see they've got one on the wheels, there's also one on the windscreen, and there are a few other little Jeep little symbols that you can see throughout the cabin. Now I've left the best part of the Wrangler's design till last. Unlike a conventional car, you can actually take the Wrangler apart. So if it's a sunny day, you could take the midsection of the roof off. If you want your passengers to get a little bit of sunlight, you could take the back part of the roof off. If you want even more air to come into the cabin, why not take off the doors? And like the original Willy's Jeep, you can even fold down the windscreen. It's truly remarkable, and it's not something I'm going to do today because it looks like it's about to rain. But if you've got the technical know-how and the patience, it's something that you can do on any Wrangler within the range. Nothing is normal about the Wrangler, and that of course applies to the boot. So instead of lifting up the tailgate like that, we're going to open it out like so, which is perfectly fine, but if you're in quite a tight parking space, you're probably going to hit the car behind you, but never mind. And we can open up the loading room by flipping up the window like that. As you can see, the boot's not very big at all. You could probably get a suitcase in there and maybe an overnight bag, but that's about it. However, if you don't have people in the back seats, you can fold them down and open up a lot more room. All you need to do is pull a little tab up here, push the bench down, and then once it's flat like that, you can actually push the whole thing up to open up a significantly larger boot. Obviously, you can't carry 2 more people anymore, but if you're going on a long road trip with you and somebody else and you want to take lots and lots of bags, now you can do so. If you lift up this little panel on the boot floor, you have a really interesting section because you've actually got 3 little areas of where you can put the screws when you take the car apart. So to help you not lose them, you can just slot them into these little holes. If I remove that panel, you've got a jack down there as well as a toolkit to help you take off the roof and doors. The last thing is this little graphic on the door, which tells you the car's dimensions of both the two-door model and the four-door as well. And it also tells you that it's made in the USA and built in Toledo, Ohio. The Wrangler you see here is the Sahara model, which, at £46,315, is the second cheapest model in the range. It comes with keyless entry, a reversing camera and an 8-inch touchscreen display. The £41,525 Sport model is almost identical, although it comes with a smaller touchscreen and does away with the Sahara's 18-inch wheels for a set of 17s. At the top of the range is the £50,815 Rubicon, the most off-road focused model with locking front and rear differentials and dedicated auxiliary switches if you want to add a set of spotlights to the roof. Who wouldn't want to do that? Most cars are available either in 2- or 4-door form, with the latter adding an extra £1,500 to the price tag. Inside the Wrangler, and you know what? It's actually quite a nice place to be in here. You've got leather on the steering wheel, soft touch plastics on top of the dashboard, a leather on the armrest, leather seats, and even the cheaper plastics don't feel all that scratchy. I really like the layout. You've got a nice mix of physical buttons and a touchscreen, and the overall design is really quite nice. I like how Jeep has acknowledged that just because you're going off-road doesn't mean that you have to have a back-to-basics cabin. This is the kind of place where you would want to spend a bit of time. Storage is pretty decent too. You've got a couple of big cup holders down here. Under the armrest, I've got two little storage compartments. If I lift up the first tab, I've got quite a shallow thing where back in the day you would store CDs, but now I've no idea what you'd put down there. And under here you've got a much larger bin. There's also a little slot to store your key next to the cup holders. And at the base of the dashboard, we've got a little tray that you can put a phone in. There's no wireless charging there. And to be honest, I had an iPhone resting in there and within about 5 minutes it had fallen out. So it's not all that useful. You've got a few connections under this little media flap, and I'm guessing it's under a flap if you've got the roof and doors off and it starts raining so that water doesn't mess up the electronics. But anyway, under here you've got a regular USB and also a USB-C, which is really handy. The infotainment system isn't too bad. It's nice and sharp, but it's not the most responsive of systems, and the buttons and font are just a little bit too small, so it does mean that you will have to take your eye off the road to concentrate on what you're going to be pressing. Now, the instrument cluster is a mix of analog dials and a small digital display. So the digital display functions all right, it's nice and clear. My only slight issue, and it's similar to the infotainment display, is that it's a little bit laggy and a bit slow. So if you're changing between menus, there's almost a 2-second delay between what you press and what comes up on the screen. So I want to go to the next menu, and if I press the button, now it appears. And let's go to the next menu, I'll press the button, and now it appears. That's kind of annoying. This is the two-door Wrangler, so space is a little bit cramped in the back here, and there's only enough room for 2 occupants. Headroom-wise, I've got absolutely loads. There's just, I would say, 15 centimetres, maybe even 20 centimetres to go between my head and the roof. I'm 180 centimetres, so if you're 6 foot, you should be absolutely fine. Legroom is a slightly different matter. If I were to sit straight, my knee would be rubbing up against the back of the chair, but because I've got a massive wheel arch to my right, I have to position my legs slightly differently. I either have to lean over to the right like that, or I have to separate my legs between the back of this seat. It's not bad, it's just a little obscure. There are ISOFIX points as well if you want to put a child seat in the back. They're nice and easy to find because they're just at the base of the seat. In the centre here you've got 2 air vents for the air conditioning, 2 decently sized cup holders, and there's also an AC adapter if you want to charge something up on the go. Depending on how you look at it, getting under the bonnet in the Jeep Wrangler is either really fun and quirky or a right faff. I'm in the right faff camp. Let me explain. There's no conventional bonnet release. What you have to do is instead unclip this and then unclip it on this side. Now you can't just lift the bonnet up, you then have to go and get the key and unlock it. Now you can lift it up a smidgen, and then you've got to find the latch. And now that it's up, and it is an extremely heavy bonnet, although I'm not particularly strong. And there. There are only two engines to choose from, a 268 brake horsepower 2-litre petrol engine and a 197 bhp 2.2-litre diesel. Both models come with an 8-speed automatic gearbox, and they both have surprisingly similar fuel economies. The petrol model can achieve around 27 mpg, while the diesel is closer to 30. Given how similar the engines are on fuel consumption, I'd probably just go with the petrol. It's a really smooth and pretty damn quiet engine, so I don't see any point of going to a diesel, especially when you'd have to pay more on filling it up in the first place. Now, when you step inside the Wrangler for the first time, you'll notice that it has two levers in the center console. Now, the first one is the drive selector, so choosing between park, reverse, neutral and drive. And the other is for the transfer case. Now, because this is an all-wheel drive car, you can choose where to send the power. If you put it in 2H, the H standing for high, then power will be sent to the rear wheels. And that's the setting that's recommended for if you're just driving along on a tarmac road or a motorway. Beneath that is 4H, that's four-wheel drive, high gear. And then you also have a 4L, which is four-wheel drive, low range. And those two in particular are for when things get a little bit muddy. I'm going to leave it in 2H for the moment because I'm on the tarmac for now, but when you change the drive selector, it's not as simple as pushing a button or just flicking the lever. You have to really tug at it, and it makes it feel as though some big mechanical objects are moving beneath the cabin. Having the ability to adjust where power is sent to between the front and rear wheels should give you an idea of just how old school the Jeep Wrangler is, and it's built on a ladder frame chassis. Now that means that basically the body and the underpinnings of the car are two separate entities, which makes it incredibly easy to repair if something goes wrong. And if you're the kind of person that likes to tinker on quite a grand scale, it makes the car very easy to modify. And it's a problem that people have had with the new Defender. Being a unibody car, where the body and chassis are all combined in one shell, it makes it a lot more conventional. It's not quite as rugged or as traditional as people in the off-roading community would perhaps want. However, being on a ladder frame chassis and having gigantic off-road wheels does make the Wrangler pretty awful as a road car. At the moment we're cruising along on tarmac in two-wheel drive mode, and the car is both very noisy and incredibly bouncy. Now we're on quite a smooth stretch of tarmac at the moment, but what's really impressing me is the Wrangler's ability to turn even the smallest bumps into a mountain range. Another thing as well is that because the tyres are like balloons, keeping the Wrangler in a straight line is quite a challenge, particularly when it's windy. It's a bit like going to a bowling alley with someone that's not very good at bowling. You turn up and you put those little guards up over the gutters, so if someone messes it up they can just ping pong off the barriers and at least hit a few pins. With this, you're kind of ping ponging your way from white line to white line in a bid to just keep it going straight and true. But you've got to take into account that it's an off-roader, so it's got massive tyres and it's got soft springs, so you are going to bounce all over the place. And when you take that into account, yes, it's a challenge, but in equal measures it's also absolutely hilarious to drive. Another thing that alarmed me was how slow it takes for the wheel to centre. So if you're coming out of a junction, you can't simply just put the power down and wait for the steering wheel to wind its way back to neutral. You have to manually wrestle it back into the centre position. That's made even funnier by the amount of torque this car has. So when you come out of a junction and you put your foot down, you're suddenly launched ahead at speed while also trying to wrestle the car back into the neutral position. But a Jeep Wrangler isn't designed to be a road car. It does off-roading brilliantly. This could be one of the best and one of the last old school off-roaders on the market. But if you're considering a Jeep Wrangler as a fun everyday SUV, it'll be a good laugh for probably about 10 miles, and then you would have just wished that you had bought something like a Land Rover Discovery instead. Think of it like this. If you buy a Lotus Elise, you know it's not going to be the best road car. It's going to be noisy, it's going to be bumpy, and it's going to drink fuel. But you buy it either to take it on track or because you want a car that really connects you to the road. But the same could be said for a Wrangler. If you're looking for an off-roader that also works as a brilliant everyday car, go out and buy a new Defender. You won't be disappointed. But if you're an off-roading enthusiast, you want something that is a real icon. You've seen the new Ford Bronco and you've gone, oh, I wish we could get one of those in Britain. Well, go for a Jeep Wrangler. Yes, it'll make you car sick. Yes, it's concerning that it only scored 1 star in the Euro NCAP safety ratings. But if you can look past that, it's hilarious. I'm going to be so disappointed to see this thing go. I feel exhausted and need a break every hour that I drive this thing. But I want one. Just because it's a new car doesn't mean that you have to pay new car prices. You can head over to YesAuto.com and check out all the great deals that we've got on both new and used Jeep Wranglers. I'm Cam Tate. See you in the next one.